Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We have plenty to talk about in the playoffs, as a lot has happened since last Friday when we last did a show. We've got these series are all interesting, with the exception of the one that is now over, as the Phoenix Suns swept the MVP Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. We're going to be talking about how that happened. I haven't talked to Sap yet about the controversy in Game 4 with Nikola Jokic getting ejected. I'm interested to hear his thoughts on that. But we're also going to spend more time on the series that are currently ongoing. The Clippers and Jazz are at 2 games apiece. The 76ers and Hawks are at 2 games apiece. And the Bucks and Nets are at 2 games apiece. Tonight, we have that Bucks-Nets series in that pivotal Game 5. No Kyrie Irving, but perhaps James Harden in this one. Sap, just a general thought about this round of the playoffs so far? Or
Bit about
thoughts? Doesn't have to be
injuries.
one thought.
It can be many thoughts. I probably do have many thoughts, and oftentimes I can't really put
I
them
didn't
all
want to
together.
limit you.
No, I'll go one at a time. But it's been about injuries, right? Kyrie Irving gets hurt on Sunday in Game 4. Milwaukee evens that series up. Harden has only played less than 1 minute in the series so far. He's going to give it a go in Game 5 with that bulky hamstring. Um, every team has been impacted by injuries at some point. Milwaukee lost Dante DiVincenzo. Again, not a great player, but still a starter. Uh, I think they've missed some of his defensive intensity and three-point shooting. You look at Philadelphia, Danny Green's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks with the calf strain, but more importantly, Joel Embiid is playing with some sort of right knee injury, which has limited him. We saw him in Game 4. He goes 0 for 12 from the floor in the second half. Didn't think that was possible. Um, Atlanta's missed a couple of players. Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter is now out, so they've lost 2 players that are rotational guys. Even in the Western Conference, the one team that's remained healthy for most of this has been the Clippers, but now Kawhi has something to do with his knee, but it doesn't seem to be that big a deal. He should be okay for Game 5 in that series against Utah. And Utah, of course, Donovan Mitchell's been dealing with that ankle since the end of the regular season. Seems like he aggravated it in Game 2. They don't have Mike Conley. So every team has dealt with injuries. Denver got eliminated, got swept. They didn't have their second best player, Jamal Murray. And we know Phoenix in the first round, especially, but not all that much in the second round. Chris Paul dealing with that shoulder. So every team is dealing with something. Phoenix has an advantage now because they've advanced to the conference finals, and the conference finals are not going to begin for at least another week.
No, it's massive for them. You're right. It's
Massive for
massive.
them just to get Chris Paul healthy, to get everybody rested. The only thing is they're playing so well, they probably don't want too long of a break, right? Because right now they look like the best team in basketball. They obliterated Denver, and really the last 3 games against the Lakers, they look superb. So they've on this 7-game win streak where they're winning by an average of 20 points per game, and the games seem to be over in the second quarter. So they probably don't want too long of a break. But when you got Chris Paul, who's 36, dealing with that shoulder, a little bit more rest is probably beneficial for the Phoenix Suns. It's been about injuries. This is a war of attrition, and whichever team can remain healthy has a better chance to win a championship than those other teams that are dealing with these injuries.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that it's a war of attrition, and typically an NBA season is, as
Mm-hmm.
it's usually 82 games and it happens. It's the injuries are more heightened this year because the schedule is more condensed. It makes
Right.
sense. Less time to rest means more susceptibility to injuries. So I don't think anybody should be particularly surprised by it. Obviously, in a perfect world, you want every team to be 100% healthy in the playoffs so you get the best possible matchups. It's just by virtue of how playoffs work, they're at the end of the regular season as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to the beginning. So you're going to naturally have players missing time. It's just part of the NBA. This isn't anything new. Maybe there's slightly a higher percentage of players getting hurt, but every year there's a team in the playoffs that's severely impacted
Yep.
by an injury that occurred either in the playoffs or in the regular season. Heck, 2 years ago, we saw it happen in the actual NBA Finals
Mm-hmm.
with Klay Thompson going down and Kevin Durant going down. So everybody's talking about the injuries, and that is obviously the big story, but it is also nothing new. This is what happens in football and baseball and basketball and hockey. The seasons are long, or in football's case, it's a very, very brutal sport. By the time you get to the end of it, players are naturally going to be hurt.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean
I
it's
don't want
it's
to bring
about depth.
I
It's
don't want
about
to
depth, obviously.
I think Sap too that there's a degree of with Brooklyn's injuries. Could this be potentially karma related? I don't know. I'm not a Buddhist. I think those are the people who believe in karma, but I do find it strange that the two people who burned teams in their past, Kyrie Irving and James Harden, are the two guys that have gotten hurt in this series. I'm just saying, if you're
Well,
exploring religion, Sap, might be something to look into.
yeah, I'm going to push back on that, Jed. First of all, James Harden, I think his injury has more to do with the fact that when he left Houston, he was probably approaching my weight of 250 pounds, if not more. He was completely out of shape. He played himself into shape during the season. Then he missed the final month of the regular season with that hamstring. So I think that has to do with conditioning, maybe not karma. Kyrie Irving, people are saying, well, was it the same foot that he stomped on Lucky at the TD Garden when the Brooklyn Nets won Game
Mm-hmm.
4? Look, I don't think there was karma that Giannis's foot was there when he came down. That's just playing basketball. I mean, that happens whether it be on the
Or is it?
playground or, well, you could take it any way you want. And again, it's just, he went up and Giannis was there and he stepped on his foot and turned the ankle pretty badly. So you could paint it that way if you want. I just push back and say that there's injuries in basketball. And as you said, this has been going on for years. I mean, you can go back every single year and the championship has been determined by injuries. Even last year, I mean, the Lakers were going to beat the Miami Heat, we think. They did it in 6 games, but Goran Dragic was hurt very early in that series. Bam Adebayo was never right after getting hurt early in the series. The year before, you mentioned
Well, look at
Golden
the
State.
Celtics, Sap. The Gordon Hayward missed most of the playoffs with an injury. So, and maybe
Right.
they beat Miami. You don't know.
It's a possibility. I mean, you can go back, obviously, 2015, LeBron in his first year back at Cleveland loses Kevin Love in the first round against the Celtics and then loses Kyrie Irving in the first game of the finals. Maybe that finals plays out differently. You can even go back to 2016 Western Conference Finals or 2017. Remember game 1, San Antonio was up big on Golden State, and looked like that was really the NBA Finals, San Antonio Golden State in 2017. And then Kawhi Leonard got hurt his ankle. Jaja Pashula ends up with a dirty move. Kawhi's out for the rest of that series. Golden State takes care of business. I'm not saying that San Antonio would have beaten them if Kawhi had remained healthy, but who knows? You keep
Chris
losing
Paul
these
a couple
big stars.
years ago, right?
2019, right? Yeah, his second year in Houston, he's got the hamstring. They're up 3-2. He gets hurt in game 5. They end up losing in 7 games. They probably win that series if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt. So this is something that happens all of the time in the NBA. Again, you've got a condensed schedule this year, and now are players not sure how to play in terms of staying out of the way of not injuring other players. We keep hearing that. I know there's so much micromanagement in sports that we saw the Kyrie injury in slow motion, like there's a Pruda film at some point. Could Giannis avoided being in that situation? I mean, he's got a huge foot. He's going up probably for the rebound if Kyrie misses the shot. So, again, the thing we have to be careful of, Jed, is these games are played at a very high speed. To slow it down and say, well, this guy could have moved his foot a little bit differently is ridiculous. It's ridiculous when you say, well, if he could have just slid his right foot over, Kyrie wouldn't have sprained his ankle. I mean, they're playing it at much higher speed than we even
it's like
realize.
Saying, Sap, if Kennedy had just shifted his head a little bit to the other side, maybe that bullet wouldn't have gone through his head.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bullet and it's going at
it's real time. No. I mean, you can't look at these things. That's why I always love to see hard hits in the NFL, and they'll show it in slow motion. It does no service to how hard the players hit because it's in slow motion. That actually diminishes the impact.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, Sap. These injuries, these are humongous. Remember, humongous human beings that are moving and jumping and running at incredible speeds and heights and stuff like that. I don't think you can look at it that way. And no. I'm not saying karma and the fact that I'm happy Kyrie got hurt or James Harden got hurt. I'm just floating it out there that it just seems like a strange coincidence, Sap. I don't want to go all big baby on you and say, see, that was the leg that you stomped on with Lucky. That's what happened. Listen, I appreciate you, big baby, but I'm not going to celebrate Kyrie's injury. I'm just
same
pointing out that
was it the same leg? I don't even know if it was the same leg.
He knows what he's talking about. He knows what chicken legs and lamb legs and that sort of stuff. Those are the only legs he's focused on.
Something you can devour.
But obviously injuries are a story, probably the story, as they typically are at this time of the year. It's
Mhm.
it's no different. It just with the Lakers and the Nets being so high profile and both of those teams being impacted by injuries, it's going to be a bigger story. Those were the two title favorites. Anthony Davis and LeBron James were hurt. Anthony Davis missed time with an injury, and the Lakers lost. And the Nets now have lost two in a row. Their second and third best player are hurt in this series.
Yep.
And meanwhile, Durant just keeps on trucking. For him, he had a bad game. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well for him. He still had 28 and 15. That just shows how good he is.
Well, he wasn't efficient like he normally is. I mean, the two games in Milwaukee was 20 of 53 from the floor, which is so far removed what Kevin Durant generally is. I mean, Kevin Durant's a 50, 40, 90 guy. And there were points in this postseason where he was a 60, 50, 90 guy, which doesn't even seem to make much sense, doesn't even seem possible. Again, PJ Tucker was allowed to play physical against him in the two games in Milwaukee. Going to see what happens tonight when they go to Brooklyn for a pivotal game 5. If PJ Tucker can play physical against Kevin Durant. I don't think that's going to happen because the game's going to be in
Brooklyn. Yeah, so
that's right. He's not allowed in Milwaukee. Durant's got his own security guard that has to protect Durant. Apparently, not just outside of the court, but actually on the court. Maybe that security guard will start setting picks for Kevin Durant, and that will get him going. I mean, Durant's one of those guys where 20 for 53 over a 2-game period. Look out! I mean, he's bound to put up 45 tonight, and if Harden plays even 24 minutes and is somewhat effective, the Nets could take hold of this series once again because those two guys are that talented.
Right, Sap. So my question for you is, with this series, is this about changes Milwaukee has made to get it even, or is it because Brooklyn's gone down with injuries and that's why Milwaukee's been able to get it even?
Well, I mean, game 3, Kyrie was there. No one really played well in game 3 for either team. I mean, Giannis and Chris
You were
Middleton
hating on Giannis early, Sap.
Well, I mean, that was in game 4. He's frustrating to watch, Jet. I mean, he's a marvelous player, right? He's 6'10", 6'11". I've compared him to Russell Westbrook, like this a giant version of Russell Westbrook. He's in phenomenal shape. He plays his ass off. He tries really hard. But he doesn't really have a game. Like, he has no moves to the basket other than he just goes to the basket and overpowers people. He doesn't even have a spin move. Like, LeBron goes to the basket as a spin move, can use either hand, can pull up halfway there, have a floater, do something, make great passes off of that. Giannis is just a big athlete out there who plays his ass off, and I give him credit for that. But it's not like a finished product. I mean, I would rather watch Durant than Giannis. Durant to me is like a basketball genius, just how efficient he is, where Giannis is somewhat frustrating. Like, how many offensive fouls did he have on Sunday? He's just barreling into people.
Yeah, he's a bull in a china shop. I mean, that's what he is.
It's almost as if he hasn't really learned how to play yet, which is kind of scary. Now, compare that to Joel Embiid, who, is even bigger. That guy is skilled. I mean, Joel Embiid, first of all, he hits about 85% of his free throws. He can shoot from 3. He can handle the ball, it seems like, even better than Giannis. He's becoming a good passer. Like, he's skilled.
Isn't that crazy that Embiid is bigger than these guys and a much better free throw shooter? Like, Ben Simmons is on the same freaking team as Joel Embiid. And Ben Simmons, doesn't he look at this guy and be like, how am I shooting 20% lower from the free throw line than this guy?
Even more than that. I mean, Embiid is legitimately an 85% free throw shooter.
40% lower? Like, what is
it's like half. I mean, when Simmons hits 1 of 2, I look at that as a win. If you're a Sixers fan, go, well, it's not too bad.
1 for 5 last night.
Out of bed. It's just terrible. It can't be on the court at the end of a game. You've got a guy who's running your offense who can't shoot free throws. It's just something that is mystifying.
Which is a really good comparison to what we saw with the Phoenix Suns in their sweep as we're bouncing around from series to series, which is fine, is that basically you can't foul them at the end of the game because Chris Paul's a 90% free throw shooter and Devin Booker's a 90% free throw shooter. So, like, when they have the lead at the end of a game, if it's within that free throw game contest, Phoenix is going to win every time. They don't miss free throws.
No, and they don't turn the ball over either. That's why Phoenix is the one team, when they have a lead, they just build on it because they don't turn the ball over. In that 4-game sweep over Denver, Chris Paul had 41 assists, 5 turnovers, 6 steals. Think of that, 41 assists to 5 turnovers.
Yeah, that's crazy.
My guy Aaron Rodgers had 48 touchdown passes last year, 5 interceptions. So it's somewhat similar to that. Like, doesn't make sense that you would, have that many assist or touchdown passes and not have turnovers. So Chris Paul's playing at a very high level, but he's always been that guy, right? I mean,
the game 4 was the best game I've seen out of him in years. And I mean, he's been really good too. And that was still the best game I've seen out of him. I mean,
he just took it from there.
He was unbelievable in that game. He could not miss.
he looked like a top 5 point guard of all time, which,
Yeah.
Stephen A. Smith said he is. Obviously,
Well, that's
Skip
what you
Bayless
want in a
doesn't put him in
closeout
his
game,
top
Sep.
15.
That's what you expect.
I think he smells it too, Chris Paul, at this point. Now,
Yeah, because the Nets guys are injured. That's why it smells.
Well, that does help. I mean, I was texting with my niece's husband, who's a big basketball fan. He goes, well, it'd be interesting if Chris Paul plays the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, because we know his history with the Clippers, right? So he'd have to get through them, and then he shows up as a member of the Phoenix Suns against Brooklyn, coached by Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni, who of course have those ties to Phoenix. And then he would also, in some sense, be going against DeAndre Jordan, who doesn't get off the bench, but also Blake Griffin. So 2 former Clippers would be on the other side.
And James Harden.
Talk about a redemption tour. Right. He, again, did not end well with James Harden in Houston. I mean, this is,
probably hates Kevin Durant too, just for
at some point. I think
for good measure, right?
I think he has one friend in the league, and it's LeBron James. And I don't even know after the series if that is still the case, because they went at it pretty good. This is the redemption tour for Chris Paul. It's the FU tour for Chris Paul, because if he wins a championship and is able to beat the Clippers in the West and then the Nets in the finals, boy, what a cap to his incredible career.
You're right. He feels that this is his last chance to win a championship.
Yeah, because it's kind of opened up for him, right? Because of the injuries with the Lakers, they were able to beat the Lakers, and then you play Denver, and Jamal Murray's not there. And look, Denver's one of the 4 teams that made the conference finals a year ago. I give them credit; they at least got to the second round. The other 3 conference finalists got knocked out in the first round.
I had Denver in 7 in this series, Sap, so I was dead wrong. I mean,
no, I had Phoenix in this year. Phoenix is playing at such a high level right now.
You didn't have him in a sweep, though.
No, no one did. I don't think Chris Paul. Well, maybe he had him in a sweep, or some of the old Phoenix Suns. Look, I'm going back 40 years. My senior year in high school, my 2 favorite teams were the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns. I wanted that to be the NBA Finals in 1981. Maybe it's going to happen in 2021.
Do you feel 18 again, Sap?
No, I don't. Not at all. I feel older than being 58. I feel like I'm 98 at some moments. But that's what I'm rooting for. And look, I don't know if the networks want that, because Milwaukee's not really a sexy team. Giannis is not the face of the league or the future face of the league.
I think they can sell Chris Paul, though. I think they can sell him.
But is he a warm and cuddly guy? He really isn't. I mean, he's kind of
no. But is anybody on Brooklyn?
They're more polarizing, though. Right?
Everybody hates them. People
they do
tune in, I guess, to root against them.
I mean, the dream matchup would have been Lakers, Brooklyn. Of course, you didn't want to see that, but that would have been the dream matchup, because you get the 2 biggest markets. You've got
for the network,
5 humongous stars. Yeah, that would have been obviously appealing. I would say the Clippers and Nets now becomes the most appealing final for the networks. And I've told you a million times, the Clippers at their best are damn dangerous. And I think we've seen that the last 2 games against Utah, because Paul George has stepped it up to the level that we think he can reach. But back to Phoenix, I mean, it's just a great story. I mean, you can't help but root for Monty Williams, what he's gone through. Lost his wife 5 years ago, persevered, and is just someone I've always been a fan of. Devin Booker's an emerging star. He seems like a likable guy, because he's a big game player. And also, I think he's a leader. He was the first player that got in Nikola Jokic's face after that hard foul, even though he's given up about 6 inches. So I think they're a likable team without question. They got a great fan base. They've had a history where they've been good for long stretches of time, just hasn't been recently. But, there's a team that's made it to the conference finals numerous times, made it to the finals in 76 and again in 93. And maybe they're going to do it again and maybe break through this year.
Now, let's talk about Jokic, Sep, since you brought him up. Let's talk about the ejection in game 4 for obviously a flagrant foul, a hard foul. There was a windup there. I've seen people argue both sides. I don't know how you can argue for the MVP of the league being ejected in a playoff game, let alone an elimination game. I didn't think it was nearly blatant enough. I thought, in fact, it was borderline fireable for the officials to eject him from that game. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, does it matter that he was the MVP of the league? I mean, if it was
should.
just...
Do you think if LeBron had done the same thing, do they eject LeBron?
He's the face of the league. There's a difference.
Okay, let's say Kevin Durant.
Same thing. I mean, Draymond Green got suspended for a game for kicking LeBron in the balls, but Draymond Green's
he wasn't
not
the best player even on his own team.
No, he was the 3rd best player at that point, because they didn't have Durant yet. No, he shouldn't have been ejected. I don't think he should have been ejected. It looked worse than it was. It looked like he went to throw a punch. and instead he got a lot of ball, but he also grazed his nose. And now what made this a little bit maddening, Jed, is they went back to watch the replay and then determined to eject him, which made no sense. I think after you watch the replay, you'd say, okay, we can't eject this guy. We'll give him a flagrant one. And
yeah, which I would
that's
have
what it
been.
should have
I'm
been.
fine
Yeah,
with
that's
that.
what it should have been. Not a flagrant 2 and you're gone. I mean, it's game 4 of the postseason. They're down 3-0. They're only down 7 at that point. The guy was frustrated. I think you did see a little bit of the weakness of his game. He gets frustrated, and when he gets frustrated, I don't think he knows his way out of it. We saw it last year in the Western Conference Finals when Dwight Howard was physical with him. Remember a regular season game a couple months ago where the Celtics went on this incredible run? They put together like the best 12-minute stretch of basketball and came back and beat Denver. He just sat on the bench and wanted nothing to do with the final 5 minutes. I think he's mentally soft.
He was also getting no help in this series too.
Right. He didn't have his best teammate, Jamal Murray. Michael Porter, who is at times Jason Tatum's, at times Kyle Kuzma. Aaron Gordon is incredibly overrated. I mean, here's a guy
he did nothing for them. Everybody
talks about this guy like he looks like Aaron Judge, right? I mean, they look alike, about the same size. In fact,
do.
Aaron Judge is actually bigger. Aaron Judge is a lot better at baseball than Aaron Gordon is at basketball.
Yeah.
Remember at the trade deadline, Jet, everyone was talking about 3 guys on the Orlando Magic, right? Fournier, Aaron
Vucevic,
Gordon, and Vucevic. I'm like, if these guys were all that good that everybody wanted them, why does Orlando suck? I've always thought of that.
He's a niche player. He's probably like a 6th man is what he is.
Shouldn't even be a starter, right? On a really good team, he should be giving you 27, 28 minutes a game off the bench. An energy guy, right?
Yeah.
Almost what Brooklyn uses Blake Griffin for now when they're all healthy.
Yeah, I think he's actually he's like a poor man's Blake Griffin when Blake Griffin was in his prime. That's what he is.
Athletic guy who his game's not going to transition.
Freakishly, I mean, he's an unbelievable athlete.
But those guys don't transition later in their career to getting better. Because their biggest asset is athleticism. Like Chris Paul's biggest asset is his mind. I think Chris Paul, kind of like Paul Pierce, plays like an old man game. Paul Pierce could probably get in shape, stay away from the strippers and stay away from the card games and the alcohol and whatever else he's doing and spend 3 or 4 months. And he could probably show up in the NBA and come off the bench and get you 12 points. I mean, they're highly skilled guys. Aaron Gordon, Blake Griffin, they rely so much on athleticism that then at the end of their career, they're not going to be all that good. I worry about that with Russell Westbrook, who relies so much on athleticism, except he's just got a bigger heart than those guys.
But you have seen also guys like Derrick Rose has been able to change his game completely into becoming, a good floater guy, a good use, because athleticism and speed aren't the same thing. He's still quick, Rose, and he's strong. He just can't explode and jam it over you like he used to, which is the difference between being a good 6th man and an MVP. So you're seeing that Derrick Rose too, and great players figured out. Jordan was always athletic, but he lost a little bit, became a better jump shooter. Dr. J also became a better jump shooter later in his career.
Kobe was the same way. And I think even LeBron, who's LeBron and Michael
has become a better 3-point shooter than when he came in the league. I agree.
But LeBron and we always have to keep kind of LeBron and Michael away from everybody else because they were the combination of athleticism and skill, right? So they had all of that rolled into one. Kobe's that guy as well, that could beat you with athleticism and skill. Bird and Magic, not quite the athleticism of those 3 guys, but the skill level of the mind was so high that they made up for it. But it's just back to Aaron Gordon. It's just like he was supposed to be the guy that puts Denver over the top. And look, once they lost Jamal Murray, I was surprised they beat Portland in that first round. I thought Portland would beat them, which speaks kind of how poor Portland is if they couldn't beat that Denver team in Phoenix.
Yeah, Lillard did everything he could. I mean, it's not his fault.
He's got nothing. I mean, he's really got nothing. I mean, CJ McCollum's not what he used to be. And you could make a case Portland has one of the worst front courts in all of basketball, right? I mean, they're the only team in the NBA that can't find 3-and-D guys. There's just an abundance of 3-and-D guys. They can't find them.
So Denver now eliminated. We both agree Jokic shouldn't have been ejected. Not that if they had won that game, it wouldn't have made a difference anyways. They would have lost the next one in Phoenix, presumably. So that series is the only one that's over. And the series we haven't talked about yet, other than just in passing with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid at all, is this Hawks-Sixers series, which has suddenly gotten very interesting. 2 games apiece. I don't think anybody saw this happening. We all said, the Hawks are a nice team, But I don't think people thought this one could potentially go the distance, and it looks like it could very well go 7 games now.
Yeah, it appears that way, right? Because Philadelphia can't quite finish off their opponents, partly because Ben Simmons can't be on the court at the end of games because of his free throw woes. And now without Danny Green, who's a good defender and a good 3-point shooter, they're going to lack there at points as well. But obviously, Embiid's injury is the key. If Embiid is able to play at 85% of what he normally is, I think they'll be fine. They'll find a way to win the series. Doesn't bode well for the next round, because they're going to need everybody healthy to beat either Milwaukee or Brooklyn. That's just the way it's going to be in the Eastern Conference. It felt like in Game 4 that Philly lost that game more than Atlanta won it, if that makes any sense. It just
they had a couple leads down the stretch that they blew.
They got up 4 late. And at that point I said, okay, they're going to be just fine. But Embiid
Curry hit a big 3, right? And they went up 4 with about 50 seconds left, give or take.
A little more than that, but it looked like they were in control of the game. And then I don't think they ever scored again. And then Embiid missed a layup. I mean, he airballed a layup.
Didn't hit a shot in the second half.
0 for 12. So that's a major concern. And now you get Doc is kind of knocking his own players. And look, I love Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers was one of my favorite players because in the 80s, covering the Celtics, oftentimes my duty was to go into the losers locker room in the playoffs and get interviews with the opposing team. And Doc Rivers was such a stand-up guy. I mean, Atlanta and the Celtics played a couple times in the postseason. Celtics won both series. And after every game, Dominique Wilkins was also great, but Doc Rivers would just sit at his locker and take every last question. Love him. He has had problems in the postseason. I mean, Doc Rivers now in his career has blown 3 games-to-1 leads in his postseason coaching career.
Yeah,
he's also lost
great.
3. He's also lost 3 other series when he was up 3-2. I mean, so figure that out. He's had 15 closeout games that he's lost in his career as a coach. 3 times up 3-1 and 3 other series, not the same series, 3 other series up 3-2. So he's gone 0-15 in those 6 series.
Is he a Hall of Fame coach, Sepp?
He's going to get in. He'll get in because he was a good, not great player. He made the All-Star team once. That's not enough to get you in. I know the bar is very low in the NBA to get into the Basketball Hall of Fame. He's also a very good broadcaster. The media loves him.
Right. He'll get in as a coach or nothing.
He'll get in as a coach. Yeah. And look, he won 1 title as a coach. D'Antoni in the Hall of Fame?
No.
And he hasn't won. They put everybody in the Hall of Fame. So
they do.
I kind of lose. I mean, if you win 1 championship in college, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like, I think once Calipari won at Kentucky, he's been put into the Hall of Fame.
Building a statue of him at UMass, I just saw.
Yeah, I saw Dr. J.
Dr. J, Camby, Calipari, and I forget who the 4th person is.
Yeah, Dr. J didn't cheat. The other 2 were involved in some sort of cheating, but
prove it.
Dr. J does deserve to have a statue. Dr. J averaged 20 and 20 in college, 20 rebounds a game. At the time, I think he was about 6'5".
That's not bad.
And not bad. He was pretty good.
Seth, back to this Philly series. You're right. They can't close. That's a big problem. Ben Simmons is off the court at the end of the games. You can't shoot free throws. Here's my big problem. And I've been saying this for months. And I like Ben Simmons' defense. You like Ben Simmons a lot more as a player. 11 points last night, Sepp.
Yeah.
It's the playoff. He has to score more. He has to be around 20 or in the 20s. 11 is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it against the Hawks. It's certainly not going to cut it against Brooklyn or Milwaukee, or if it's Phoenix or any of these teams remaining. He can't put up 11 and expect to win a game.
No.
They just can't do it.
And he's got to be better at reading the room, right? And saying, okay, we don't have Danny Green. And I'm not trying to overrate Danny Green, but he's a nice piece for that team, right? I mean, he's a guy who's won 3 championships with 3 different places. He's a good ball player. I mean, he's not a great player, but he's a guy that, is a nice piece on a championship caliber team. He's
probably like the 4th best player in the Celtics.
Yeah, probably the 3rd best player in the Lakers. They probably should have kept him. But he's out. And now you've got Embiid struggling in the second. It was obvious Embiid was struggling in the second half. It looked like he couldn't even get up and down the court. Sometimes that's just Embiid. But his turnaround, his jump shot, it seemed to be about a foot off. Like it wasn't even close.
For threes too. You could
just tell he wasn't
took
right.
A couple threes. You're going, what the hell?
at that point, Embiid's got to realize, okay, I got to take over here. Like I got to read the
Simmons.
room. Simmons has got to read the room and say, I've got to take over. I'm supposed to be that guy. I mean, he's a max player, right? He's considered
Yes.
a franchise caliber player. He's
Number
got
one
to take
pick, max
over.
contract.
Yeah, I mean, the skill level is ridiculous except he can't shoot. And that's something that I wonder if he works on it in the offseason. And all those great players we mentioned, they always came back every year better at something. You know, uh, Magic had the ugliest looking shot when he came into the NBA, and he learned to develop still an ugly shot, but the thing went in. He worked on it. He
Freaking
developed a hook
Lonzo
shot.
Ball has learned how to shoot, and he had about
Exactly.
the ugliest shot you could ever imagine, and he's at least reliable at, somewhat reliable at
He's
it.
worked on it. You're right, Jeff. That's a great point. And all these guys, I mean, Jordan and Kobe became really good low post players, and Bird became a good low post player. You know, LeBron's worked on his 3-point shot.
There's no reason he shouldn't be a 20-point a game scorer. No reason.
Not at 6'10 and a half, 250 pounds. I mean, the guy is a freak. He's left-handed, which I think always gives you somewhat of an advantage. He's long, he's strong. I mean, even when he goes to the basket, it doesn't seem right. Like he seems to be like a half a step off when he's going to the basket, so that he's not quite at the rim, but he's a little too far out to really just lay it in. And it's kind of confusing. It's frustrating watching him play.
11 points, 10 shots. Like you can't be that guy and expect to win a championship. You need to take more. Even like, okay, we know Giannis, he's not a good shooter, but he'll take them. And by virtue of just taking them, Nor, he'll score more points. Simmons won't even attempt it. I'm not saying even necessarily be better at it, but you throw the ball up, occasionally it's going to go in. He has to provide more points for his team. Period.
No.
This is not going to get it done.
No, I mean, the one thing I'll give Giannis all the credit in the world for, his motor is constantly at the highest, right? I mean, Giannis, he's from the get-go, that guy is busting his ass on the court. Simmons is just so looks like he's just kind of there at times.
Well, they need points, and Giannis will be quadruple to the team, and he'll say, F it, my team needs me to score. Right. I'm going to at least try. Simmons, he would so much rather pass the ball in every situation. He would be comfortable taking no shots a game.
Yeah, which is fine if you've got a bunch of scorers around you. That's nice. You've got Embiid, who's playing on one leg, who's 0 for 12 in the second half. You don't have Danny Green. You know, I mean, I love Seth Curry, but is he the go-to guy?
Tobias Harris has outplayed Ben Simmons in this postseason.
Oh, Tobias Harris is a legitimately good player. Now, there's another guy. He only took 15 shots last night. I thought he should have got more aggressive.
Yeah, and he was 8 of 15. He was good.
Yeah, he's good. He's just he and Chris
underrated.
Middleton.
He's very good.
Are both similar players, right? They're both
very
perfect
similar.
as like the third guy. They're pros. They're there. They're probably the easiest guys to coach. You don't have to worry about them. They're not quite good enough to be.
But that's the frustrating part with the Sixers. Yeah. Like you have the number one guy in Embiid. No one argues that. He can be the best player in the championship team without a doubt. You have the number 3 guy in Harris, a perfect number 3 guy. And you have the guy that should be the number 2 guy. It's like they have the formula to win a championship, but Ben Simmons won't take that adjustment to his game to make him that player that he needs to be in order for them to win a championship. He has the skill to do it and the talent around him, but he hasn't made that leap. And if I was a Sixers fan, I would say, please talk to Portland, trade this guy for Damian Lillard. We can win a championship with Lillard, Harris, and Embiid. That's a championship team. This should be a championship team, but Ben Simmons hasn't grown as a player enough for it to be a team that I think can be taken seriously against Brooklyn if they're healthy, or even Milwaukee if they're healthy.
Ben Simmons should be Scottie Pippen, like a modern day Scottie Pippen. I mean, he's a little bit bigger, but that's just the progression of the game. Everyone's bigger, but he's got a similar skill set, like great defender, can defend all different types of players, outstanding rebounder, great passer. But Scottie Pippen became a really good scorer. I mean, when Jordan wasn't there for nearly 2 years, Pippen elevated and averaged over 20 points per game. In fact, Pippen, I believe the first year without Jordan was 3rd in MVP voting. He had a great year, and the Bulls still were contenders. They went from 57 wins with Jordan to 55 without him. So I think Simmons should be Scottie Pippen, and Pippen at times was passive offensively because he was playing with the greatest scorer of all time. Ben Simmons is playing with Embiid, but I think he should force the issue a lot more. That's an interesting trade because I think he would be perfect in Portland. It's more laid back than Philadelphia. I don't know how he survives in Philadelphia. That is a very intense market. Like Philly, Boston, New York,
and they're weirdly protective over him, though.
Yeah, which doesn't make a lot of sense because they'll boo. I mean, Bryce Harper, 3 weeks into his journey in Philadelphia was getting booed.
Like
They'll
one
boo
game
anybody.
into it. He went like 0 for 4 in his first game.
Yeah.
They were throwing
I mean,
snow cones at him.
they booed Donovan McNabb when he got drafted. I mean, so Philadelphia's a tough town, but for some reason Simmons skates. It is odd. It's an odd thing to watch.
Why isn't he a more skilled Giannis? He's the same height and weight as the guy.
And he has a better feel for the game.
Just as athletic.
And he has a better feel for the game. He's a better passer. Yeah, it's just I don't know.
Giannis scores 15 more points a game than him.
Yeah.
I mean, does that make sense?
Well, do you also look back and say, geez, the guy was at LSU that couldn't even get into the tournament? Like,
yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I don't want to compare everybody to LeBron James. If LeBron James went to Ohio State for 1 year,
win the national championship,
did win the national championship. Yeah, because I mean, that we're talking again, someone totally different. That's a different thing. But you think if Kobe went to Duke, Duke would have contended for a national championship? Yeah. Hell yeah. You know, Ben Simmons goes to LSU, they don't make the tournament. That's what was my only turnoff of Markelle Fultz back in 2017 at the draft. I'm like, if this and you watched
the tournament,
it did make the tournament. You watched them a lot more than I did, and you said this guy's, got the potential to be really good.
I thought he was a home run, no doubt.
And he still could be, because when he's been able to play, you see it, right? You see, some similarities.
That's a very interesting skill set.
He does. He's kind of like a Russell Westbrook type, but he just can't stay healthy. But I also wonder, like, can't these guys at least drag a college team? Like Zion at least got to the regional finals at Duke, although his team was loaded. They lost to Michigan State in a
Durant dragged
his
game. College team.
Yeah, I mean, you see that. I mean, I'm not going to get into Kemba Walker won a national championship at Connecticut, but you get my point. That Ben Simmons couldn't even bring LSU to the tournament.
No, and the Sixers Hawks. I mean, Trae Young's outplayed him, right? Should Trae Young be outplaying Ben Simmons at this point in each of their careers?
No, he's 8 inches shorter. He's been in the league 1 fewer year or 2 fewer years. No, Trae Young. I mean, we're both Trae Young fans,
and he's cooking him on both ends of the court.
Yeah,
he's cooking.
He is. He's a fabulous player. And the thing is,
how many assists last night, Trae? 18
assists
for Trae Young.
18
in a playoff game. That's crazy.
And he doesn't have many elite scorers with him, right? I mean, the assist is still dependent on the guy putting the ball in the basket.
He's the only guy who can make his own shot on that team.
Right, and he doesn't have great offensive players with him. I mean, he's got some alley-oops to John Collins.
And good shooters around him, but
they're good, but they're not great. And John Collins, he threw about a 45-foot alley-oop to John Collins that Collins missed the dunk. That was just a spectacular pass. I mean, he's one of the elite passers in the sport. We compare Trae to Steph Curry. Steph's the better shooter, there's no question, but I think Trae Young's a better passer.
Yeah, it's not a fair comparison. Trae Young, 25 at 18 last night, and assist to turnover ratio, 18 assists, 2 turnovers.
That's Chris Paul like. Yeah, he's sensational. I mean, they've got a puncher's chance in this series. And, if Philadelphia blows this series and somehow Milwaukee beats Brooklyn, which could happen, especially with all these injuries that Brooklyn's dealing with, the 76ers will say, man, we've got a real opportunity here, because everyone seems to think whoever wins the East is going to win the championship. But now you got all these teams. You got self-doubt in Philadelphia. Milwaukee still looks very bumpy offensively. I mean, they were allowed to play physical defense in Milwaukee. They're going to be allowed to do that in Brooklyn. Brooklyn's got all these injuries. Atlanta, I don't think, is ready to win a championship. Meanwhile, Phoenix is sitting at home, got a week to rest. I mean, maybe the path
broken
opens
very
for
well
them.
for Phoenix.
It
has broken very well for them. If Philly loses the series, Sap, do they trade Simmons in the offseason?
It's a massive contract, but I think, man, that's an interesting trade.
I don't see how they
Dame Lillard.
Could run this back if they lose in this round to Atlanta, being the 1 seed. I don't know how they can justify bringing the same team back.
Yeah, 2 years ago you lost to Toronto on Kawhi's buzzer beater in Game 7. Okay, right. So you shake hands and go off the court. Last year the Celtics swept them in the first round. Ben Simmons, and you can just say, look, it was a COVID year and the bubble and whatever. You can use that as an excuse if you'd like. This year, though, it was set up for them. Number 1 seed. We all agree that the one team we all felt was going to be in the conference finals this year was going to be Philadelphia, because as good as Brooklyn is, we knew they'd have to beat Milwaukee to get to the conference finals. And we've seen in that series that's a real series. Right. So, and even in the West, I mean, you were higher on the Lakers than I actually was, but the West was very wide open because it was deeper than the East. So the one team I felt was going to make the conference finals was Philly, and they had it last night. They were in total control of that game, and they stopped playing. And now this means you're going to have to play at least 2 more games to get to the conference finals, and who knows what Joel Embiid's knee is like right now. He's got a slight meniscus tear. From what I understand, he really can't do much more further damage on it. What happens is it's a flap, which sometimes gets stuck in the mechanism of the knee, can cause incredible pain, and then it pops back out. It's just going to be pain management, pain tolerance. And again, from what we've seen of Joel Embiid, I don't think he's great with pain management. Some guys are. He doesn't appear to be one of them. Again, he's a huge guy. He's 7'1",
a lot of weight
280.
to be putting on the knee.
Yeah, he's massive. And his game, I mean, every time I watch him, I'm in like total shock at how good he is. Like this guy could be a top 5 center of all time.
Maybe he should develop a sky hook.
Or he could develop anything he wants. But I mean, when Shaq says he's better than Shaq, that's saying a lot, because Shaq doesn't throw compliments around. This guy looks like a bigger version of Hakeem Olajuwon. Like, I mean, that's
he
damn
does.
scary.
You're right.
That's what it reminds me of. I mean, the hands, he's got phenomenal hands. He's now becoming a decent passer, the great free throw shooter. He can hit threes. I wonder how seriously he takes the sport. You know,
he can put the ball on the floor too.
Oh my God. I mean, he's just like, he's scary. And if he takes conditioning more seriously and all that, he may just be a guy who goes through his whole career, becomes a Hall of Famer, but underachieves because he never really took it seriously. You know, the way that the 3 great centers that we always talk about, Russell, Kareem, and Wilt didn't necessarily take it seriously. He's just so much better than everybody else that, you know, by accident, not by accident, by genetics, he was one of the 3 greatest centers. I talked to a good friend of mine, Upton Bell, who actually played high school basketball against Wilt. And he said Wilt had so many other interests, including, you know, sleeping with 20,000 women, that the game of basketball was not high on his list of things that he was mostly concerned about. Whereas Russell ate, drank, slept, everything basketball. He's such a competitor. And Kareem, he was that way, except not quite as vocal, say, as Russell as a leader. He just did it by example. So Embiid's got that type of talent, though. There's no question Embiid's probably more gifted than Moses Malone or Olajuwon or Shaq.
A few in the league, in the history of the league, have been more talented than Embiid.
Yeah, I mean,
just from pure basketball talent standpoint.
Shaq said it, right? I mean, if Shaq's saying it, then I'm going along with it, because, like
I said,
it
wasn't a one-off. He says it all the time.
And Shaq, again, does not throw compliments around. I mean, he's more gifted than Moses Malone. If you had taken Moses Malone's engine and put it into Joel Embiid, you'd have the greatest center ever. I mean, this guy is that good, and he's easy to root for. I like him. I know you do too. He's the personality.
Yeah, no, I think he's got a great personality.
He's got a great personality.
He's a troll.
He is. He's great. He's fantastic. I love him.
He loves being. He's a wrestling heel.
Oh, he's great. I mean, the league is better because of Joel Embiid. And then you got Simmons, who makes Kawhi Leonard look like a frantic guy on the court. Like, I mean, like Kawhi's a cyborg, but Simmons is a cyborg with.
Yeah, he's the CD-ROM you install into the cyborg.
He is, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Kawhi looks, you know, like Russell Westbrook compared to Simmons. Yeah. So it's kind of frustrating to watch Simmons. It's a weird dynamic, those two players, and from reports, they're not necessarily good friends.
I don't
like
think
how could they be? I mean,
opposite personalities.
Embiid's like the life of the party, and Simmons looks like he's in a trance most of the time.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up Kawhi, because we're going to wrap up with this series. We haven't talked about the Utah Clippers series, which, again, like these other series, 2 games apiece. Sap, how have the Clippers gotten back in this, and what stands out to you the most so far through 4 games in this series?
Offensive efficiency, and the biggest thing is Paul George the last 2 games has played the way he's quite capable of playing.
Playoff P.
Playoff P has showed up in games 3 and 4. And, you know, we talk all the time about maddening players in the league, like Ben Simmons. Paul George is one of the most maddening players in the league. And I'm watching him and I say, this guy has no discernible weakness, right? I mean, there's 8 things to do on a basketball court, he excels at all of them, right? I mean, the guy can score from 3, from mid-range, going to the basket, although he misses more layups than any great player I think I've ever seen. But he can score in a multitude of ways. Excellent passer, really good rebounder, can defend all sorts of players. Like, he's got all the skills you would want to be a top 10 player, maybe not even a top 5 player, but up there. And he never quite puts it together. He's to me the opposite of Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is the player who is greater than the sum of his parts, whereas Paul George is the player that is less than the sum of his parts.
Yeah, you kind of get the feeling that if you swap the two of them,
Oh,
Miami wouldn't have made the playoffs, and the Clippers would be heading towards the championship right now.
yeah, just based on their DNA. Now, if you put, you know, Jimmy Butler, the whole other stuff that Jimmy Butler brings, which he can be an a-hole, right? I mean, but
Yep.
sometimes that's what you need, and you put it into Paul George, you'd have like
No,
a
Paul
LeBron
George is
James
more
type player.
like naturally gifted than
Oh my
Jimmy Butler,
God.
for sure. I
I mean,
mean,
I've compared Jason Tatum to Paul George, and Celtic fans, oh no, he's got to be better than that. I've said, well, the skill level. I mean, Paul George's skill level is off the charts. I mean, there's nothing he can't do. He did finish third in MVP voting a few years back in
2 years
Oklahoma
ago,
City. Yeah,
just
so
2 years ago.
he's that good. If he's playing like that to go with Kawhi, and the big key there is Marcus Morris hitting threes, they're going to be tough to beat. I do think, and then we've said this all year, their ceiling is probably right there with Brooklyn's. I think that if everyone's healthy, Brooklyn Clippers would probably be the most interesting series in terms of pure talent. Because Kawhi does have the
It would have
championship
the largest
DNA.
collection of talent on the court at a
Yeah,
given time.
and great matchups, right? Because you could run Kawhi or Paul George at Durant. You're not going to stop them, but you
Yeah, but
can
the
run them
problem
at
is
him.
sometimes the Clippers suck, even though they
Oh
play
no,
like they'll play terrible despite their
they're
talent.
wildly unpredictable for a veteran team. Now we talked about Doc Rivers 3 times losing a 3-1 series lead and 3 times losing a 3-2 series lead. Ty Lue seems to be the opposite. If he comes back and wins this series, if the Clippers win this series, that'll be the 4th time that Ty Lue's come back from being down 2-0, and he's not had a very long career coaching. He did it in 2016 with the Cavaliers in the finals. He did it in 2018 with the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics. He was down 2-0, and they came back and won. He did it in the first round against Dallas by losing the first 2 at home. I mean, you lose the first 2 at home, you generally don't live to tell about it. And here he is again, started this series against Utah down 2-0. They look to be in complete control of this because Mitchell, as great as he is, he's not an efficient scorer, and I don't think he's 100% right now. I think he tweaked that ankle towards the end of game 2, and they really miss Mike Conley. If Conley can get back into this series, then you could have a big difference. But the Clippers are damn scary when they're clicking on all cylinders. But like you said, Jet, they're not consistent.
And your guy that you were so excited about them getting at the trade deadline, Rondo, has been a healthy scratch. He's not even in the rotation anymore. And you just learned Ibaka is not going to be back for the playoffs.
Yeah.
He's got a back injury with surgery. So they're not even at full capacity, and they've been playing really well these past 2 games. But, I mean, I don't think that because of the way they play, they could easily lose the next 2 games and be bounced. I don't know how to make heads or tails of this team.
No,
and I haven't since the playoffs started. I had them eliminated after they lost the first 2 games in the last round.
Yeah.
And they maybe headed to the finals at some point. I just can't. I would say don't bet on any of their games.
Yeah, they're almost like the Michael Porter of teams, right? When they're good, wow, they're really good. When they're bad, they're really bad. Like the ceiling is high, the floor is low. It kind of all depends on Paul George, right? I mean, if he's playing like he has the last 2 games, you have 2 elite players because we know Kawhi is that guy, right? I mean, Kawhi does everything on the court.
He's already proven it.
Mm-hmm. He had a dunk last night that was just absolutely.
Oh man, I mean, that was crazy.
Over Derek Favors, I thought he put Favors into the basket. He does some things on the court that remind me of Dr. J because he's got enormous hands. I mean, thus the nickname, the Claw. And it's just like he's one of those guys, too, when he's going up, and you're like, is he going to dunk this? And then he does, and you're like, holy crap, because he's 6'7". He's not a huge guy.
And he just casually will just dunk over somebody. No reaction. Same thing.
No reaction.
He hit a free throw.
Yeah, I mean, they asked him after the game.
2 points.
Yeah, it's 2 points. Next time I'll come down and have 3. They asked him after the game the other night, you're 2 wins away from getting to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in franchise history. He goes, I'm not worried about the Western Conference Finals. I'm here to win a championship. I don't pay attention to anything on the outside. And I believe every word he said.
Was he on the Patriots?
He would be a perfect Patriot. Well, he was a Spur, same type of thing, right? Yeah. And then he, after a while.
Probably Belichick's favorite basketball player, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that'd be perfect, right? Like, as I said, if everybody was like Kawhi Leonard, the league would be IBM.
Shows the team in the locker room clips of Kawhi Leonard. That's how you talk to the media, guys. Just like that guy.
Don't say a word. Yeah, I mean, he was just, and it's so funny watching after the game, especially Paul George, who he talked about some issues he had in the bubble last year with anxiety.
Yeah.
And Paul George, you can tell even in his post-game interviews, he's constantly like looking down. He doesn't make eye contact. He does seem so uncomfortable with the spotlight, right? I mean, some guys eat it up.
Well,
Like,
remember both of those guys, smaller schools. Paul George, Fresno
yeah,
State. Kawhi Leonard,
yep,
San Diego State. I mean, not high draft picks.
no,
So a different DNA than some of these other guys.
weren't they almost no? Actually, wasn't Kawhi drafted by Indiana and then traded
Yes,
for George Hill? Yeah,
for
George Hill.
Correct. Yeah,
That was a bad trade for Indiana. I mean,
yeah,
imagine if
Larry Bird didn't get that one right.
Whoa, imagine Kawhi and Paul George growing up together in Indiana. That would have been interesting. And then they decide to go elsewhere, end up in L.A.
Yeah, that's right. They were almost teammates in a different city.
Yeah, and like, do they talk? Like, I don't like. It's a weird combination.
Yeah, they blink.
They blink at each other. They still got like cornrows. Like,
yes,
not many guys in the league use cornrows or do cornrows.
But Paul George didn't always. I think he's doing it because
Kawhi, yeah, like Kawhi, like we don't even know what car he drives. Like, he's just very. I get the feeling. I remember years ago.
His sneaker sponsor is New Balance.
New Balance, yeah, which I wasn't aware they made basketball sneakers. It's a running shoe company. Yeah, I mean, there was a time
for old white guys.
For old white guys, yeah, like I probably have New Balances somewhere in my closet.
You go to the hospital, you see every nurse in the hospital wearing.
Yeah, he's wearing nurses' shoes. I mean, he's not even with Nike. And I remember years ago, Ken Griffey Jr. was so sincere and kind of innocent when he first came up with the Mariners. Even his first few years, his check, he just had a savings account and a checking account. Like, he would physically, I mean, this is before direct deposit, but he'd like go to the bank with the check. He wasn't really diversifying his funds. Like, now these guys like don't even see, where the money is.
What do you say? Can you make change for 15 million?
Yeah. It was almost like, sir, your check is 250,000 every 2 weeks. Okay, well, put 50 in my savings account, put 50 in my checking account. And, it was like, but Kawhi almost is like
the rest. Petty cash.
Kawhi reminds me a little bit of Kramer, in Seinfeld. I
don't know what he spends his money on. I have no idea what he spends his money on.
I remember Kramer one time, Jerry.
But I bet you it's a safe investment, whatever he spends.
Yeah, he's a 2% guy. But Kramer and Seinfeld was, Jerry was like, yeah, I'll go to the tool shed to get that stuff. And Kramer took him literally, thought that Jerry had a tool shed, a shed with all these tools in it. So, no, he's a unique player, and this time of year he's scary. He's scary because I don't think it really affects him.
So do you think the Clippers are going to close this out, Sap?
Utah's tough to beat at home. I mean,
very tough.
Mike Conley is the key if he comes back. But again, you coming back from a hamstring, how good is he going to be? And he's a guy who relies on explosion, right? He's an explosive athlete. How good is he going to be with the hamstring? I could see Harden playing through it because he's, kind of a fat guy who plays on skill more than athleticism.
And just draws fouls, so
and draws fouls, yeah. And the whistle is going to be in favor of Milwaukee tonight. I mean, in favor of Brooklyn tonight. That's all we've heard about. PJ Tucker, turned into Lawrence Taylor in 2 games in Milwaukee against Brooklyn. So if Connolly can get back in this thing, I think they have a chance. But Mitchell's going to have to carry them. He broke 30 the other night. We have 37 in the loss. 9 for 26. I mean,
they are for a team that should be so great defensively with 2 of, in my mind, the best perimeter defensive players. They have been giving up some large amounts of points to individual players. Luka averaged like 40 in that series, and Mitchell is averaging like 40 in this series. Is it just the league, Sap?
Well, unless they just let him shoot, let him get his points, we'll hold everybody else down. I mean,
maybe that's how you beat them. Maybe that's the strategy.
Dallas didn't really have anybody else, so that strategy worked through 7 games. And the strategy here is who's Utah's second guy? Jordan Clarkson. This is where they missed Mike
Conley.
Their
second best scorer. Yeah, Clarkson.
Yeah. I mean, Gobert's an outstanding player, but he's not a guy you
other guys are good, but like they're not, Bogdanovich is a well-rounded player, but he's not a guy you can rely on for 20 every night.
Yeah. And Joe Ingles can shoot. Yeah. Joe Ingles has perhaps the quickest release I've ever seen.
Oh man, lightning quick.
It doesn't even touch his hand. It's like he redirects it, and he's left-handed.
Maybe he should teach his country mate Ben Simmons to shoot.
I know. Someone's got to teach Ben Simmons something.
All right, Sap. Let's end it with the line tonight. Bucks Nets only game on tonight. Again, 2 games to 2. James Harden looks like he's going to give it a go. Kyrie Irving will not play. Milwaukee's favored in Brooklyn tonight by 2.5. I don't know if that is going to be updated with the news about Harden playing, I would imagine yes, or maybe it'll just get taken off the board completely.
Earlier, no, they'll never take it off the board. But it was 4 earlier. So the 2.5 has to do with Harden now being
That's
expected to
all I
play.
think
But
he's worth.
well, you don't know with his injury. I
Uh,
like Brooklyn tonight only based on the zigzag theory. I think Durant's going to have like a monster game tonight.
I think this is the biggest game of Giannis's career.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, you're right.
so I will take Milwaukee,
Okay,
but I don't feel good about it. And I will take them with I will take Brooklyn with the 2.5. So I'll take
well,
Milwaukee winning, but I think that it'll be a 1-point game.
you're threading a needle there. That's a
Very
tough one to
fun.
pull off.
Yep.
It's like
We'll
trying
see.
to draw an inside straight
I'll
flush.
look either very smart or
Yeah.
deny that it ever happened tomorrow, Sap.
Casinos like guys like you. I mean, take Milwaukee with the money line and take Brooklyn plus the 2.5. That's called a middle. You know, it's a
That's
possibility.
why I don't gamble.
Me too.
Probably.
That's two of us.
So I've been
10
hot
years.
in this postseason, except for with this Nuggets series, which I would have lost people a fortune had they listened to me.
Yeah. No, I mean the Nuggets I think they were just gassed, to be honest with you. Like every other team that made it to the conference finals last year. Is such a short off season, they had nothing left.
Yeah. All right, Sap, that's going to do it for us. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. We're also going to be on a new app soon, Halftime's Hoop. We'll tell you more about that as we're going to be doing a couple live shows on that app. So stay tuned, listen for how to download that and hear us there. We're excited about that. And we will give you all the latest stories around the NBA tomorrow when we are back. Make sure you check out our Twitters at JohnSap25, at JetStryer, and the YouTube version if you're not watching already, youtube.com/JetStryer. See you, everybody.